Overland Park, Kansas is the second best place in all of the country to buy a home, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Here are the pros and cons of living in Overland Park. If you stick around until the end, we are going to talk about crime in Overland Park because the stats may surprise you. The first con has to be the price. To live in the second most desirable city in all of America is going to cost you. The median price point home in Overland Park is $455,000. Compare that $455,000 to the median price point home for the rest of the Kansas City metro, and that's $287,000. So you can see you're paying more than $100,000 extra for a comparable home in Overland Park than you would in different parts of Kansas City. And guess what? You can find really decent homes for way less than that in other parts of Kansas City, but if you go into Overland Park, you can expect to pay a lot of money. Let me share a story of one of my clients with you. Last year, we were looking for a home in Overland Park, and they finally found one, but before in the process, we were making offer after offer after offer and not getting any accepted. One of the offers we made, we got a reply that we were the 37th offer that was made on that particular home. Now, it was a beautiful home. It was $350,000, so less than the median in Overland Park. It was still pretty nice, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, about 1,500 square feet, but 37 other offers wanted that home in Overland Park. 37 other families or investors or parties or single people, whoever was looking to buy that home, and eventually it got bid up so high that it closed $40,000 over asking price. It was absolutely insane, and I want to say I had never seen anything like it, but unfortunately I have, especially in desirable areas like Overland Park. You are going to pay a lot of money to live there. It's going to be desirable, but you're going to have to pay to be there. Now, speaking of buying a home in Overland Park, if you're considering moving to Overland Park or anywhere in the Kansas City metro, we would love to help you. We specialize in getting people homes in the Kansas City metro. And we've had people from all over the country reach out to us and our team to help them find their perfect home in Kansas City, including Overland Park. Taking you back to that buyer who was competing with 37 other offers, we eventually did get them a home that they absolutely love in Overland Park. So if you're looking to relocate here to Kansas City, especially if you are buying a home, 816-4-MOVE-KC is our number, 816-4-MOVE-KC. Call or text us. We will get back to you to help you move here to Kansas City. Now, if you're talking about $455,000 as the median price point home, what exactly are you getting with all of that money? You're getting the first pro, which is the best school districts in all of Kansas City. Overland Park is home to 3 of the best school districts in Kansas City. Number 1, which is the top-rated school district, is the Blue Valley School District. Everybody loves the Blue Valley School District. Number 2 is the Olathe School District in Overland Park as well. And also number 3, Shawnee Mission School District is also located in Overland Park, depending on where you move inside Overland Park. All of these have high statistics in terms of student proficiency, student attendance, and really high graduation rates. I've had multiple clients who have moved into the Blue Valley School District who are thrilled with the help that their students are getting. I've had certain clients who particularly chose that school district because their child had special education needs, and they said Blue Valley School District had so many different resources for their children and the special needs that they had. So if you're looking for the best school districts in all of Kansas City, then you are looking for the Blue Valley School District or different school districts in Overland Park. So we talked about the awesome school districts, but in order to get these awesome school districts, you're going to pay a little bit more in taxes, which is our second con of living in Overland Park. You're going to pay more in taxes there than in other parts of the Kansas City metro. Now, it depends on where you move in Overland Park, so I don't necessarily want to get really deep into the tax numbers, but just know it is going to be more expensive in terms of housing price and taxes to live in Overland Park. Also, while talking about taxes, I also want to talk about the fact that in Overland Park, you do have a lot of HOAs that can be seen as a negative. Now, to you, that might be a positive because you think HOAs really keep property values and really keep places safe, and that may be true for some places, but I know for a lot of people, they don't like HOAs. With the taxes and the HOAs, those are going to be added fees for you to live in Overland Park. But with all of those taxes and fees, you are getting one of the best infrastructures in all of Kansas City. That's our second pro of living in Overland Park. If you know anything about Kansas City and you know anything about the condition of the roads here and the trash pickup and the utilities here, in Kansas City, Missouri, it's not necessarily the best. But in Overland Park, you are going to get awesome roads. Some of the roads in Overland Park are under construction right now, but they're all really wide. I would say some of the widest surface streets are in Overland Park, they have like 4 or 5 lanes. It almost feels like you're on a freeway, but when you're driving down, you see that they're all really well maintained. You have a lot less potholes there than you do in Missouri. It's just that those crews are getting out there and fixing them a lot faster than they do here in Missouri for some reason. I don't know why. It's super frustrating to drive around. The other day I was driving around in Missouri and my car hit a pothole so hard that the bumper like almost came off. And I had to repair it. I had to go get a screwdriver, kind of screw it back in. It was really unfortunate. But you're not going to necessarily find that as much in Overland Park. Of course, there's still potholes. This is still the Midwest. We still have the same weather in Overland Park as we do here in Missouri. However, it's going to be a lot better maintained because you are paying a little bit extra to live there, and the infrastructure in the city is a lot more organized than a lot of parts here in Missouri or even other parts of Kansas. Now, speaking of potholes, you might ask, why do potholes form here in Overland Park and in other parts of Kansas City? Well, that is because of the weather, which is our next con of living in Overland Park. You get all the Midwest weather in all its glory. Today is actually a really nice day in January. However, a few weeks ago, it was so frigid cold here in Kansas and Missouri, in Overland Park also. And I do have a client who we're actively looking for a home now, but they live in a condo in Overland Park, and they were saying that their heater could not keep up. They could not get the temperature in their condo above 60 degrees because it was so cold here. You are going to get the full Midwest weather in all of its glory. And I also had that same client say the insulation was so bad in their condo that their pipes froze and they burst. Luckily, because they were renting, they did not have to be the ones who fixed that. The property manager and the property owner did. But that's going to be a huge negative in moving here to Overland Park, especially if you're moving from somewhere that's going to be a lot more sunny, that's going to be a lot more temperate and mild. Here in the Midwest, there are radical weather changes. There's super cold weather. There's super hot weather. There's a lot of humidity. There's going to be a lot of snow. It's going to be something that you're going to need to get used to, and moving to Overland Park is not going to change any of that. You're going to get the full Midwest weather in all of its glory. And you know what? When it gets really, really cold here or really, really hot here, you really don't want to go super far away from your house. This leads us to our next pro is that if you move to Overland Park, you never have to leave Overland Park unless you want to. You have everything that you could possibly want in Overland Park right at your fingertips. You don't have to go super far. Within 15 minutes, you can have all the dining that Kansas City has to offer. You have a Joe's Barbecue down there. Although, I'm going to give you a tip. If you can, go to the Joe's in Kansas City, Kansas, not the one in Overland Park. Somebody told me that the one in Overland Park wasn't as good as the one in Kansas City, Kansas. And I didn't believe them until I actually went to the one in OP and I tried it. I think what happened is they have a newer smoker than the one in Kansas City, Kansas. The one in Kansas City, Kansas, out of the gas station is the original one, and the one in OP is the newer one. So I would say even if you live in Overland Park, make the short drive over to the one in Kansas City, Kansas, because that Joe's is going to be one of the best barbecues in Kansas City. Look, if barbecue is not your jam, you have all the food that you could possibly want in Overland Park. In Overland Park is one of the best Oriental markets around Kansas City metro area. You have a lot of great Oriental food. You have good Thai food. You have good Indian cuisine. You have good sushi. One of my clients actually took me out to an Ethiopian restaurant, and that was in Overland Park. So Overland Park really truly does have everything. And also, if your children are really into soccer or you want to get your kids into soccer, Overland Park is one of the best places because it has probably the biggest soccer complex in all of the Kansas City metro. If you want nature, we have the botanical gardens in Overland Park as well. So all of those things are located right in the city where you live so that you don't have to go anywhere else across the Kansas City metro if you don't want to. And that leads us to our next con in Overland Park, and that is it is not super exciting. Most of the exciting things to do here in Kansas City are going to be located downtown on the Missouri side. And you know what? That's kind of a drive if you live in Overland Park. Now stick around, we're going to talk a little bit about driving in Overland Park. But if you're kind of a homebody and you want to stick around Overland Park, you're definitely going to run out of things to do after you visit the botanical gardens. And after you do all that great shopping, you're going to wonder, hey, where's the nightlife? There's not that much nightlife in Overland Park. If you want to go to bars, if you want to go to clubs, most of that is going to be in the Power and Light District, which is downtown Kansas City, Missouri. That's not going to be in Overland Park. A lot of young people don't necessarily like to live in Overland Park because they see it as too suburban or too boring. A lot of my clients who are in their younger years don't necessarily want to be in Overland Park. They want to be in condos and lofts in downtown Kansas City because that is the epicenter of where all the fun stuff to do is and all the nightlife is. If you move out to Overland Park, don't expect there to be a big bar scene. Don't expect it to be a big clubbing scene. It's going to be pretty quiet after 6 o'clock p.m., I would say. Most of the things are going to be closing down. and the only real thing that you can do there are the restaurants. However, for a safe suburban area, you know what that draws in? That draws in a lot of unique shopping that isn't around here in Kansas City, which is our next pro about Overland Park. Overland Park has some of the most unique stores in Kansas City. Overland Park has a Shields, which is one of our favorite places to go because it has a huge Ferris wheel inside, it has an aquarium inside, it has bowling inside. There's a ton of things for our kids to do. Shields is an outdoorsy kind of store that's like employee owned. The employees there really love working there, and we love going there for outdoor stuff. It's kind of like if you think of like a Bass Pro Shops, but maybe a little bit classier. There is a Bass Pro Shops near Overland Park as well. You also have the only REI that's going to be in the KC Metro. You also have a skydiving place that you can go to, indoor skydiving in Overland Park. You have all these unique things that you can't get anywhere else in the metro in terms of shopping. If you're a shopaholic and that's one of the ways that you like to spend your time, you cannot go wrong with moving to Overland Park. There are so many different stores there. Also, in Overland Park is the Oak Park Mall, which is the only shopping mall that I would say is here in the Kansas City Metro. I came from Los Angeles where shopping malls were almost on every city, every corner, and here out in Kansas City, there are no classic shopping malls. You know, you're talking about those indoor shopping malls where you can walk around and go to those different stores. That's only in Overland Park, and that's only the Oak Park Mall. There's no other shopping mall here in the Kansas City Metro. There's a lot of outdoor shopping areas, which is kind of strange to me because Kansas City weather can be, like I said before, unpredictable. But if you want to go to an indoor shopping mall, the only one that you can go to is the Oak Park Mall in Overland Park. However, shopping typically means driving around, and while the roads are awesome in Overland Park, one of the negatives is that Overland Park is a huge area, so it actually takes a long time to get around in Overland Park. It's a long, kind of narrow city on the map, and from one tip to the other tip, it can take you about 20 to 25 minutes to actually get all the way through Overland Park. So you can be really far down south and still be in OP. You could be really far up north and still be in OP. That's one of the things that's a negative about Overland Park, is that while you have everything there, it might still take you a long time to get to where you're going, even if you're not leaving Overland Park. Also, another thing to think about, the further south you get, the farther away you are getting to downtown Kansas City. I would estimate that if you lived all the way on the south tip of Overland Park, it could probably take you 30 to even 40 minutes to get into downtown Kansas City, if that is something that you want to do. I once had a client who worked in Liberty and lived in Overland Park, and she said in order to get all the way across the metro, sometimes it would take her an hour and 30 minutes if there was rush hour traffic. I don't know why she chose to do that, but I do know that Overland Park, because of where she lived and how long Overland Park was, it took her so long to get to her job. Now, that's not a common scenario. That's not a common circumstance for a lot of people. They typically live, work, and play in Overland Park. Like I said before, there's not really much reason to leave, but if you wanted to do other things, like you want to go to a Chiefs game, you want to go to a Royals game, you want to go to other parts of the metro, it's going to take you a long time depending on where you live in Overland Park. Because it's such a big city, it can take you a really long time to get to other parts of the Kansas City Metro. Now, we talked about my client who lived in Overland Park and works in Liberty, but let's talk about working in Overland Park. And that is one of the pros, is that there are fantastic job opportunities in Overland Park, especially high-paying jobs. A lot of the industries in Overland Park are going to be health and tech related, so if you have skills in those areas, then you're going to want to look in Overland Park, and you can typically find a high-paying job out there. Now, as a real estate agent, I don't necessarily know all the job openings right now, and I don't know necessarily when you're watching this, but a lot of my clientele who live and work in Overland Park are in one of those fields, either health or technology. Now, the Kansas City area was voted one of the best places to work remote, so you want to take that into consideration as well, and Overland Park is no exception. It would be a wonderful place to live if you were going to work remote and move your job here. I have a client who just moved to Overland Park who is an actuary, and he's going to keep working remotely for the same company, and he loves living in Overland Park because it's way more affordable than where he was before. Jobs in Overland Park, if you need to find one, and especially if you work in medical or technology, I think you're going to have an easy time to find a nice paying job in Overland Park. Now, that leads us to our last con of living in Overland Park, and that is it can be too commercial or industrial for some people. Like I said before, it is kind of suburby. It is developing pretty quickly. There are a lot of strip malls. There are a lot of new constructions. And if you don't like living in an area like that, you can find some more rural areas out in Overland Park, but those are becoming a lot fewer and far between because of all the developments and all the commercial that's coming here. People are recognizing that Overland Park is an awesome place to raise a family, is an awesome place to buy a home. And that brings a lot of commercial developers out there to build more and more and more things. So in some parts of OP, it can really kind of feel really corporate, really industrial, really kind of bland, if you will. And that definitely is a negative to living in Overland Park. So you made it through the list of pros and cons, and you're wondering, hey, you said you were going to talk about crime in Overland Park. You know what? Overland Park is a relatively safe place compared to the rest of the Kansas City metro. However, there is still going to be crime in Overland Park. There's crime everywhere in the Kansas City metro. There's crime anywhere in America. So Overland Park is not impervious to that. What I would say is that according to the crime maps, the further north you go in Overland Park, remember we said before that Overland Park is kind of long and narrow. So the further north you go in Overland Park, the worse the crime is there. But the further south you go, the more rural areas, the more houses are spread out, the less people there are, and so you have a lot less crime in those areas. So if crime is important to you, you're going to want to move to the mid or the south part of OP because the north part is going to have more crime. Now, that's not a lot of crime compared to the rest of the Kansas City metro. You can easily look up those stats yourself. However, if there is crime in Overland Park, it's going to be more concentrated on the north part.